welcome to human and time. Find a comfortable place, allow the world around you to become a little quieter, and let the present loosen its hold for a while. If these journeys through the human past bring you some peace, you are always welcome to like the video and subscribe. And now, without needing to go anywhere at all, let us wake somewhere very far from home. For a few moments you do not know where you are. There is no familiar ceiling above you, no distant machinery, no glass window holding the outside world at a safe distance. The room is simple. The surfaces around you are plain, without the monumental marble that later ages will so often use when imagining ancient Greece. Nothing here announces wealth with theatrical confidence. Nothing suggests that you have awakened in one of the most famous societies the ancient world will ever remember. And yet you have. Beyond these walls lies Sparta. It is sometime around the middle of the 5th century, before the Common Era, roughly 450 BC, and you have awakened not merely in the territory of the Spartans, but as one of the men permitted to call himself a full citizen of their community, a Spartiate, one of the perioikoi, the men later remembered as the peers, or the equals. The name has a reassuring sound to it, equals. But as this day slowly unfolds, you will discover that words can hide as much as they reveal. For now, you remain still. The air inside the house carries the coolness left behind by the hours before sunrise. Somewhere beyond the doorway, the Eurotas Valley is beginning to receive the first pale light. The great ridge of Taygetus to the west is still darker than the land beneath it, a long mountain wall separating the valley from the country beyond. You are perhaps 30 or 35 years old enough to have passed through the demanding expectations placed upon a Spartan boy and young man, old enough to possess a household and to take your place among adult citizens. The world into which you have awakened does not regard you as a child being prepared for citizenship. You are already inside it. Beside this changes everything. You are not waking in a barracks filled with identical warriors. You are not surrounded by shields arranged against stone walls. Sparta is not the endless military camp imagined by later storytellers. Your life belongs to a household as well as to the state, and somewhere within this household is your wife, a woman whose place in Spartan society would seem unusual to many other Greeks of your age. She is not your political equal. She does not sit beside you in the citizen assembly. She does not hold the offices through which Spartan men govern one another. Yet she inhabits a social world that differs markedly from the restricted lives associated with many women elsewhere in Greece. Spartan tradition values physical strength in free women as well as men. Girls and women can participate in physical exercise and competitions. Women can inherit property and exercise control over it. The management of households and estates gives them a visible economic importance that outsiders notice, sometimes with fascination and sometimes with criticism. This does not make Sparta a world of modern equality. It makes it Sparta, a place where familiar categories repeatedly become less simple the longer you look at them. Your wife has grown within that world. Her position is not the same as yours, but neither is she merely a silent figure disappearing into the interior of the house. Around this valley, free Spartan women may possess land, oversee property, participate in religious life, and move through the social landscape with a degree of independence striking enough that later Greek writers will continue arguing about it. And even now, before you have stepped outside, the house is already teaching you something about the civilization surrounding it. Sparta does not begin with the spear. It begins with relationships between husband and wife, between parent and child, between household and land, between citizen and community, and beneath all of them, almost invisible at first, between the people who possess this way of life and the people whose labor makes it possible. You rise. Your clothing is simple. The adult Spartan citizen of this age is not condemned to spend every hour wrapped in the crimson costume of modern imagination. The famous red garment belongs particularly to the martial identity of Sparta, not to a theatrical uniform worn through every ordinary moment of life. Your appearance, however, may still distinguish you. Your hair is long. For the adult male citizen, long hair has become part of the Spartan image of freedom and status. It is cared for rather than neglected. The connection between hair and warrior identity is strong enough that Herodotus, writing about the generation before yours, preserves the memorable image of Spartans preparing themselves for battle by attending to their hair. But there is no battle this morning. There is only a door. You pass through it, and the Sparta outside is probably not the Sparta you expected. There are no immense defensive walls rising before you, no colossal gate, no dense forest of marble monuments, no urban horizon like the one that might greet a traveler approaching Athens. Instead, the settlement seems to breathe outward into its landscape. Homes and sacred places occupy a broad, dispersed environment rather than forming the tightly packed monumental city a modern visitor might expect from a state with such an enormous reputation. Ancient observers themselves will later remark upon this. Sparta's visible fabric does not adequately express its power. Someone judging the city only by its buildings could easily underestimate the society that controls so much of the southern Peloponnese. That contrast is one of the quietest surprises of the ancient world. Athens will leave behind stones that seem to demand remembrance. Sparta will leave behind a reputation larger than its architecture. Ahead of you, the valley opens. To the west, Taygetus rises beyond the cultivated ground. To the east lie the heights associated with Sparta. Somewhere below and across the plain runs the Eurotas, the river that gives this landscape much of its shape. Sparta is not a maritime city. The sea lies many kilometers away. Its center is inland, surrounded by the agricultural country of Laconia, and the land matters more than almost anything you will encounter today. There are fields in this valley, vines, fig trees, olives, barley. Sheep and goats move within the larger agricultural world of the region. The landscape is not the barren, brown ground stage on which films often place their warriors. The Eurotas Valley can support cultivation. Sparta's military society has roots quite literally sunk into agricultural soil. You begin to walk. The ground underfoot is firm, and the coolness of the early air is slowly losing its edge. Light settles over the scattered settlement. Somewhere ahead, people are already moving between households, paths, cultivated ground, and sacred spaces, and almost immediately another illusion begins to dissolve. Not everyone you see is a Spartiate. In fact, most of the people whose work allows this society to exist are not members of your privileged citizen body at all. The world surrounding Sparta is composed of distinctions that everyone here understands, even when nothing visible marks them clearly to a stranger. There are people like you, the full citizen Spartiates. There are the perioikoi, free inhabitants of communities throughout Laconia who do not possess full Spartan political citizenship. And there are the helots, the unfree dependent population whose agricultural labor supports the citizen elite. To awaken as a Spartiate is therefore to awaken inside a very particular kind of freedom. You are free from much of the ordinary productive labor upon which human life depends. You are expected to devote yourself instead to the obligations and practices of citizenship, physical readiness, military service, public life, religion, social discipline, communal relationships. Your time is available because other people's time is not. Somewhere beyond the settlement, helots are already connected to the agricultural estates from which Spartan households receive produce. They are not best imagined as chained figures laboring beneath constant whips, nor are they simply equivalent to the household slaves familiar from other Greek societies. They live within dependent agricultural communities, can maintain families, and possess forms of personal property. But they are not free. Their relationship to the Spartan state is coercive, and the products of their labor sustain men like you. The distinction can remain almost invisible in the peaceful light of morning. That is perhaps what makes it so important. No announcement is required. No public inscription needs to explain it. You simply walk while someone else works land from which part of your livelihood will come. Spartan freedom has an agricultural shadow, and as the sun climbs higher over the valley, the shadow does not disappear. You pass other inhabitants moving through their own mourning. Some may belong to perioikoi communities whose people contribute greatly to the economic life of Laconia. The perioikoi are free. They can possess their own local communities, participate in production and exchange, and serve alongside Spartans in war. Yet they remain outside the full political privileges belonging to your citizen class. It would be too simple to call every craftsman you encounter a perioikos. The economic relationships of Laconia do not divide themselves quite so neatly. But production, craft, trade, and the life of the surrounding settlements depend heavily upon people who will never take your place in the Spartan citizen assembly. You are beginning to see the shape of the society. A narrow citizen body rests within a much larger human landscape, and still nothing feels hurried. The mountains remain where they were before any Spartan law existed. Olive leaves turn softly in the moving air. The Eurotas continues through its valley. The land has no vocabulary for citizen and helot, ruler and dependent, free and unfree. Human beings provide those distinctions. The earth simply carries them all. A little farther along, younger figures draw your attention. Boys. Here, perhaps more than anywhere else, the later image of Sparta begins to resemble something genuinely ancient. Spartan citizens do not leave the preparation of their sons entirely to the private choices of individual households. The community takes an unusually direct interest in the upbringing of boys. Xenophon, who will know Sparta well in the following century and admire much about its institutions, describes boys being placed under public supervision rather than being educated only through private household arrangements. The purpose is not simply to teach a collection of military techniques. It is to shape behavior, endurance, self-control, obedience, resourcefulness, the ability to function within a group. The boys you see do not resemble miniature versions of the bronze, armored warriors who will one day appear in paintings and films. Their world is more austere than that. They are accustomed to moving barefoot. Their clothing is deliberately limited. Their food is controlled rather than abundant. Hardship is not regarded merely as an inconvenience to be avoided. It is used as an instrument of education. The body is being taught what the community expects the mind to accept. You watch them for a while. There is activity, but not chaos, movement, but no need for theatrical shouting. This is not a modern military academy transported backward through time. There is no surviving daily schedule telling us that every Spartan boy begins one exercise at a particular hour and another at the next. The system is known through the practices ancient writers describe, not through a timetable preserved on a wall. Nor should you imagine that every detail later generations associate with the famous Spartan agoge exists here in exactly the standardized form eventually described centuries later. The word itself will acquire its familiar institutional meaning more clearly in later periods. But the underlying reality is already present. Sparta believes that citizens can be made, not simply born. The community intervenes in childhood because the adult citizen is expected to belong partly to something larger than his household. You understand this because you once stood where these boys stand now. Whatever memories remain inside the man whose body you inhabit, you do not need to invent them. The faces in front of you are enough. They are hungry enough to learn how hunger feels. They are exposed enough to learn how discomfort can be endured. They are watched closely enough to learn that discipline is public. Xenophon records one of the stranger features of this education. Boys could seek additional food by stealing it, but punishment awaited the boy who was caught. The lesson was not a simple moral approval of theft. The expectation was resourcefulness, cunning, the capacity to obtain what was needed without being detected. A society famous for disciplined formation in battle could also value individual cleverness within carefully controlled limits. Even here, Sparta refuses to remain simple. You notice bare feet against the earth. The texture of the path must feel different to them than it does through your own footwear. Pebbled dust, hardened soil, patches warmed by the strengthening sun. Education here is not confined to words. Temperature educates, hunger educates, the ground educates. The gaze of older citizens educate, and the child gradually learns that discomfort does not always mean that something has gone wrong. Sometimes, in Sparta, discomfort means that the system believes something is going exactly as intended. Nearby, girls belong to a different path, but not to a life defined entirely by stillness. Free Spartan girls are also encouraged toward physical training. Ancient observers regard this as distinctive. Running and contests belong to the image of female upbringing here, reflecting the community's interest in physical strength among future mothers of citizen households. Later ages will sometimes transform this into an easy claim that Spartan women were simply equal to Spartan men. They were not, but their lives cannot be understood through the assumptions applied automatically to every other Greek city either. You see that distinction not as a lecture, but as movement. A young woman crossing open ground without the seclusion a visitor from another polis might expect. Older women involved in the affairs of households whose property may descend through daughters as well as sons. A society in which women can accumulate substantial holdings while remaining excluded from the formal political institutions of male citizenship. Freedom again proves to have more than one shape. For you, it means political membership. For a Spartiate woman, it can mean unusual economic authority without a place in the assembly. For a perioikos, it means personal freedom without Spartan citizenship. For a helot, the word belongs to someone else. And yet all these people live beneath the same mountain. The thought does not need to be spoken. Taygetus has been visible through every distinction. Its slopes make no attempt to understand them. You continue onward. The scattered character of Sparta becomes clearer as you move. Ancient tradition will associate the city with several settlement areas, names such as Pitana, Misoa, Limnai, and Kainosura, with Amyclae lying nearby to the south. But even the exact organization of these communities will remain less certain to later historians than popular maps suggest. The Sparta around you is therefore better experienced than diagrammed. Paths connect households and inhabited areas. Sacred places rise within the broader landscape. The low Acropolis provides one point of orientation rather than dominating everything around it. There, associated with the height, stands the sanctuary of Athena Chalkioikos, Athena of the Bronze House. Even this sacred center does not turn Sparta into another Athens. You do not look upward toward a Parthenon crowning an immense marble platform. The Spartan religious landscape belongs to a different architectural rhythm. Sacred space is woven through settlement and countryside. You can walk from the concerns of a household toward places belonging to gods and heroes without feeling that one world has ended and another begun. Religion does not wait behind a boundary-marked temple. It accompanies the city. So does memory. Some of the men passing you belong to families whose older members can remember the generation of the Persian Wars. Thermopylae is not yet remote legend. Leonidas belongs not to mythic antiquity, but to the relatively recent past. The enormous reputation that Sparta carries across the Greek world has been forged within living memory. Yet the city itself still refuses to perform that reputation for you. No giant statue announces what happened at the pass. No enormous military avenue tells you what to feel. The power is carried more quietly, in bodies, in habits, in institutions, in the expectation that a boy will endure, in the understanding that an adult citizen will take his place among other citizens, in the fields whose harvest supports that life, in the people who are included, and in the people who are not. You move farther from the doorway where the day began. The temperature has changed almost without your noticing. The coolness held near the house has given way to warmer air across the open ground. Light now catches more strongly on the pale surfaces of the settlement and on the cultivated country beyond. There is still no urgency, no trumpet calling everyone into formation, no invading army approaching the valley. This is precisely why Sparta can finally become visible. War has a way of simplifying societies. It reduces people to armies, kings, victories, defeats. Peace allows all the other lives to return. A child adjusting his footing on rough ground, a woman concerned with the affairs of a household, an older citizen watching younger ones, a dependent agricultural worker somewhere beyond the city. a free inhabitant of Laconia whose community serves the Spartan state without sharing its highest privileges. A citizen like you, whose day is structured by obligations that do not require him to cultivate the grain sustaining him. The famous Spartan shield has not disappeared. It simply has not yet become the only object in the room. And perhaps that is the greatest difference between hearing about Sparta and waking inside it. From far away, Sparta is an idea, discipline, war, endurance. From here it is a place. There is soil beneath the idea. There are families beneath it. There are inequalities beneath it. There are sacred places, property, food, children, old men, long hair, cultivated valleys, distant mountains. And there is time, always time, enough time for boys to become citizens, for citizens to become elders, for customs to begin feeling eternal even when they are not, for memories of war to become stories, for stories to become reputation. You follow a path that gradually draws you nearer to the eastern side of the settlement and the country touched by the Eurotas. Somewhere ahead lies one of the places where the religious life of Sparta has left unusually tangible traces, the sanctuary associated with Artemis Orthia. Later excavators will recover from that ground not merely a few precious dedications, but an astonishing multitude of small objects, tiny offerings, human forms, animals, warriors, images cast in lead and placed before the goddess by hands whose names will mostly disappear. More than 2,000 years from now, they will survive when almost everything belonging to those hands has vanished. But that future is invisible to you. For the moment there is only the path, the river country, the quiet movement of people ahead, and the small, sacred world waiting somewhere beyond the next stretch of morning. The path narrows as it approaches the river country, and the settlement seems to loosen even further around you. There is no sharp moment when the ordinary world gives way to the sacred one. No gate closes behind you. No enormous staircase announces that you have entered the territory of a goddess. The sounds of human life remain nearby, the muted movement of feet, animals somewhere farther off, voices carried briefly by the air, and then lost again, and yet the character of the place changes. The sanctuary of Artemis Orthia belongs to this landscape near the Eurotas, close enough to the river plain that water, cultivation, settlement, and worship remain parts of the same living environment. People have been coming here for generations. Some arrive with offerings so small that, from a distance, you might not notice them at all. A hand opens. Resting in the palm is a tiny figure cast from lead. Perhaps it represents a human being, perhaps an animal, perhaps a warrior. The object is modest enough to disappear between two fingers, yet it has been brought deliberately to this place and given away. There are many like it, more than any person standing here could count. Centuries from now, when the soil is opened by people searching for traces of Sparta, more than 100,000 small lead figurines will eventually be associated with this sanctuary. Their shapes will preserve fragments of a religious world that the written sources alone could never fully recover. But no one here knows that. For the person making the offering, there is only the weight of a little piece of metal against the skin, a few moments of attention, a gesture. Then the object passes from the human world into the sacred one. It may be tempting, when thinking of Sparta, to imagine that religion simply blesses warfare. A warrior society must surely worship warrior gods, ask only for victory and turn every ritual toward the battlefield. The reality around you is much richer. Like other Greek communities, Sparta is filled with sacred relationships extending through landscape, family, age, memory, fertility, death, civic identity, and the changing seasons of human life. Artemis Orthia belongs to that world. Athena waits upon the low Acropolis. Apollo has his important place at Amyclae farther south. Helen and Menelaus receive honor across the valley. The gods and heroes are not decorative additions to Spartan society. They inhabit its geography. You watch another offering disappear from a hand. The lead is dull rather than brilliant. There is no need for gold. A small object can carry intention. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons ancient sacred places offer again and again. Human beings do not always require monuments when they want to speak to eternity. Sometimes they choose something that fits inside the palm. The sun has risen farther now. Warmth gathers on exposed ground, though the morning has not yet reached its greatest heat. Near the river country the air has a different texture from the enclosed coolness of the house where you woke. The valley seems more open here, and the movements of people can be followed for longer distances. You turn back toward the inhabited areas. The low Acropolis is visible again. Somewhere upon it stands the sanctuary of Athena Perioikos, Athena of the Bronze House, one of the recognizable sacred centers of Sparta. The goddess carries a name that sounds grander than much of the city surrounding her. Bronze catches light differently from stone. Even the thought of it belongs to a world of surfaces that briefly glow and then darken again as the sun moves. But the sanctuary does not transform the Acropolis into the monumental crown familiar from Athens. Sparta does not need to resemble Athens in order to be powerful. The distinction matters because Greek cities do not all express themselves through the same architecture. A traveler accustomed to measuring civilization through walls, temples, columns, and stone might find Sparta puzzling. Its authority spreads far beyond what its visible buildings seem to promise. And much of that authority rests not in architecture, but in arrangements between people. As you descend toward the spaces where citizens gather and pass one another, that invisible architecture becomes easier to sense. Somewhere within this community are two kings, not one. Two. They belong to separate royal houses, an arrangement so unusual that it can seem almost legendary to anyone expecting monarchy gather around a single throne. Yet even these kings do not rule Sparta as absolute masters. Their authority is real, particularly in religious and military affairs, but it exists inside a system that divides power among several institutions. There is the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. 28 elder members sit alongside the two kings, creating a body of 30. There are 5 ephors, chosen annually, whose authority can reach into matters of administration, supervision, and political control. And there is the assembly of Spartan citizens, men belonging to the same privileged body as you. The exact balance among these institutions will continue to occupy historians long after the city itself has changed beyond recognition. Ancient sources preserve enough to reveal shared and divided authority, but not enough to reduce Spartan politics to a perfectly mechanical diagram. Perhaps that is appropriate. No political system feels like a diagram when you are living inside it. It feels like people. Older men whose opinions carry weight. A officials whose authority lasts for a year, kings whose ancestry carries sacred and military importance, citizens who understand that membership gives them a place in decisions, even when the precise limits of that place remain defined by custom and institution. You see men of different ages moving through the public world. The older ones draw the eye differently. Age here is not simply decline. The Gerousia gives old age a direct place within political authority. A man who survives into advanced years may carry influence unavailable to the young, even to younger men at the height of physical strength. That reversal is worth noticing in a society remembered so intensely for its bodies. Youth may run faster, youth may carry a shield farther, but Sparta does not ask youth to govern alone. The old remain close to the machinery of the state. Perhaps this, too, affects the way younger men move around them. A boy who is watched by adults becomes an adult who still lives beneath the gaze of elders and officials. Spartan discipline does not end when childhood ends. It changes form. Even kings live within limits. Later accounts preserve the remarkable image of the kings and ephors exchanging oaths. The king promises to rule according to established laws, while the community promises to preserve royal authority so long as that agreement is honored. Power here is not freedom from restraint. Power is another position inside restraint. The thought follows you as you leave the more public spaces behind. The open country begins to draw your attention again. Beyond the inhabited areas, the economy supporting this carefully organized citizen life becomes visible not through law or speeches, but through plants. Barley moving softly in the air, vines following the shape of cultivated ground, fig trees, olives, animals feeding where the land permits. The smell changes when you approach agricultural country. Dust remains, but it mixes with vegetation, dry grasses, animals, worked earth, and the faint sweetness of plants warmed by the sun. This is where the abstract categories of Spartan society become physical. A citizen may spend his day among other citizens concerned with training, hunting, religion, communal obligations, and public affairs. But grain must still be grown. Fruit must still be gathered. Vines must be tended. Animals must still be watched. Food does not appear because a law commands it. Someone must work. You see people in the fields, helots. The word has already been present in the morning, but here it becomes harder to hold at a distance. These are not merely a category in Spartan society. They are human beings inside the same sunlight. Some are connected to estates that sustain citizen households. Their labor produces the agricultural resources upon which the Spartiate way of life depends. They can live within family and community structures. They can possess certain personal goods. They are not best understood through the image of anonymous captives chained together in a quarry. But none of this makes them free. Their dependent status is enforced by a political order they did not choose. You stand in the same valley. The distinction between your body and theirs cannot be discovered by looking at human skin or hearing someone breathe. It exists because society has decided that one life belongs to the citizen body and another does not. The field makes the difference visible. Your time is one of the products being cultivated here. Not literally, of course, but almost. Because another person spends hours working land, you possess hours that can be devoted elsewhere. You can train, you can hunt, you can attend communal gatherings, you can participate in the religious and political life of Sparta. The grain does more than feed you. It creates the conditions of citizenship. A breeze travels through the crop. For a moment, thousands of stalks bend together. There is something almost military in their movement, though nothing human commands them. Then they rise again. The helots continue working. Sparta's relationship with them is not peaceful merely because this particular field appears peaceful. Fear lies beneath the arrangement. The citizen population knows that the dependent population is numerous and indispensable. It also knows that dependence enforced by power can produce resistance. For the man whose place you inhabit, that knowledge is not ancient history. Only around 14 years have passed since a catastrophic earthquake struck Sparta around 464 BC. The exact scale of its destruction will become difficult for later historians to reconstruct, but the crisis that followed is unmistakable. Helots rose in revolt. The unrest became serious enough to test Spartan control and to draw attention beyond Laconia. For people living around 450 BC, those events are close. Not something preserved only in old poetry. Men walking near you may remember the ground moving. Some may remember the political fear afterward. Families may carry memories of the rebellion. The very fields you are looking at now, therefore, contain two realities at once. They sustain the Spartan citizen system, and they remind that system of its vulnerability. Nothing in the landscape itself appears threatening. That is important. The barley does not whisper rebellion. The olive tree offers no political opinion. A helot bending over work does not become a symbol simply because you are watching. Human life is quieter than the histories written about it. Most days are not days of revolt. Most days are filled with the repetition required to keep people alive. Work, food, walking, weather, children fatigue, the ordinary continuance of things, and yet the structure surrounding those ordinary acts remains. Spartan citizens do not forget entirely that their privileged position rests upon people whom the state must control. Later, Thucydides will preserve one of the darkest indications of this fear, an episode in which around 2,000 helots, selected after being presented as men worthy of freedom, disappeared, their deaths unexplained to the wider world. The story belongs to the hard edge of Spartan rule. But standing here, there is no need to turn it into spectacle. The system itself is enough. A society can be quiet and coercive at the same time. The sun can warm a field in which freedom is unevenly distributed. A river can continue flowing beside people divided by law. That is one of history's most persistent contradictions. Beauty does not guarantee justice. Peacefulness does not guarantee freedom. And the people who live inside a system rarely experience it only as a system. For one man, this is the land his family has always known. For another, it is the source of his citizen contribution. For another, it is where his children grow. For another, it is the reason he does not need to labor in the field himself. Many human worlds occupy the same piece of ground. You move onward. The heat has become more noticeable now, lying across the shoulders and gathering on the dry sections of the path. The valley's earlier softness has given way to a clearer brightness. Somewhere in the distance, animals sound briefly. Closer by, the human rhythm of agricultural work continues. The food produced here will eventually enter houses and communal meals. Barley, cheese from pastoral life, figs, wine, simple products, but socially powerful ones. For a Spartiate man, Participation in the common dining system is not simply an evening convenience. It belongs to the fabric of adult male citizenship. Later, when the sun has descended and the day has drawn inward again, you will sit among other men. For now, the ingredients remain scattered through the landscape. Grain beneath the light, grapes still belonging to vines, figs held by trees, milk belonging first to animals before human hands turn it into cheese, wine beginning not in a cup but in soil. The communal meal is already present here, hours before anyone sits down to eat. Everything human begins earlier than we notice. A cup of wine begins with a season. A loaf begins with a field. A political class begins with someone else's labor. You pass from the cultivated ground toward a route used by people moving between Sparta and the wider Laconian territory. The perioikoi return to your thoughts. Their communities surround the Spartan center in ways that make the state far larger than the settlement you woke inside. They are free inhabitants of Laconia, distinct from helots and equally distinct from the full Spartiate citizen elite. They can serve militarily. They participate in the region's economy. Craft production and exchange are strongly connected with the broader world in which they live. Yet they do not enter the highest political identity you possess. Their existence makes the social map more complicated than a simple division between masters and slaves. Sparta is layered. Citizen, free non-citizen, dependent laborer, man, woman, child, elder, king, effort. Each category provides possibilities and limits. No single person experiences the whole society. You experience only the portion allotted to you. Perhaps this is why walking matters. When you remain inside one household, one status can seem like the natural shape of the world. When you walk far enough, other lives appear. A craftsman working somewhere within the Laconian economy. A farmer tied to dependent status. A woman managing property from which a man's contributions may ultimately come. A child being trained toward a citizenship someone else can never obtain. A king whose power is limited. An elder whose age increases political authority. The more people you encounter, the less simple the famous word Spartan becomes. Even the artistic world is more complicated than the later stereotype suggests. Long before your lifetime, during the archaic centuries, Laconia produced pottery, metalwork, ivory and bone carving, and stone sculpture that traveled beyond the region. Spartan and Laconian craftsmanship once moved outward across the Mediterranean world. By your own century, that earlier flourishing has diminished. The city you inhabit around 450 BC should not be imagined as a bustling artistic capital overflowing with workshops producing luxury for export. But neither has Sparta emerged from a cultural emptiness. Objects survive traditions. Metal remembers hands. Sacred offerings preserve styles whose makers have disappeared. Music and ritual remain woven through communal life. The stark warrior society, imagined by much later generations, would have seemed strangely incomplete to people who actually lived here. There have always been songs alongside spears, offerings beside shields, festivals beside military obligations. Human beings rarely agree to become only one thing. The path bends gently. The settlement is now behind you in one direction, the wider valley opening in another. To the south lies Amyclae, associated with Apollo and Hyacinthos. You are not yet there, but the place belongs to the mental geography of everyone around you. At certain times of the year, The religious life of Laconia draws people toward it for the Hyakinthia, one of the major festivals of the Spartan world. For 3 days, ritual, procession, sacrifice, music, and athletic activity can alter the ordinary rhythm of life. Men and women participate. Free and unfree inhabitants can become present within the broader festival community. The boundaries that structure daily life do not vanish, but for a time many different inhabitants of Laconia move within a shared sacred calendar. You imagine the road when such a festival comes. More feet upon it, more voices. Music carried through air that today holds only the quieter sounds of ordinary movement. The sacred year can transform geography without changing a single mountain. A road is one thing on an ordinary day, and another when a procession travels along it. A sanctuary is silent in 1 hour and full of song in another. Time alters places. People merely teach themselves how to notice. You continue southward only a little before slowing. There is no need to hurry toward Amyclae. This is not a pilgrimage with a destination that must be reached before the light changes. The day is still unfolding around Sparta, and there are other paths through it. Behind you, somewhere beyond the fields and settlement, lies the Eurotas and the sanctuary where tiny lead figures have been left to Artemis. Ahead lies country connected with Apollo. Across the river to the east, upon higher ground, another kind of memory waits, the sanctuary associated with Helen and Menelaus. Heroes of the Trojan stories are not merely characters belonging to distant poetry here. In the Spartan landscape, they can receive cult. The mythical past has addresses. It occupies hills. It looks back across the valley toward the living city. And so you turn toward higher ground rather than following the southern road much farther. The soil changes beneath your steps as the route begins gradually to rise. The cultivated plain remains below. With height, the arrangement of the valley starts to reveal itself differently. Fields become shapes. Paths become lines. The scattered city becomes easier to understand precisely because you are moving away from it. Sparta has never needed a wall to tell you where the city ends. From here, that lack of enclosure becomes even more apparent. Human settlement seems to belong to the valley rather than stand against it. The mountain remains immense beyond everything built by people. Taygetus has watched the city before you woke. It will remain after every citizen now alive is gone. The thought comes without sadness. The ancient world does not need to know that it is ancient. For the people below you, this is simply the present. Children are still becoming adults. Officials are still serving their year. Helots are still tending land. Women are still managing households and property. Offerings are still being carried toward sanctuaries. Somewhere, food is being prepared. Somewhere, an older man remembers an earthquake. Somewhere, another remembers stories told by a father about the Persian invasion. And somewhere higher ahead, the path continues toward a place where Sparta keeps company with two of the most famous names inherited from its legendary past. The air feels slightly different as you climb. Warmer sunlight lies across your back, but small movements of wind reach you more easily here. The city below grows quieter with distance. The valley widens, and the road beneath your feet continues upward toward Helen and Menelaus. The climb continues gently, and with every few steps the valley below seems to rearrange itself. From the plain, Sparta had felt scattered. From higher ground, That scattered character becomes part of a larger pattern. The Eurotas traces its course through the cultivated country. Fields lie in irregular shapes around the inhabited spaces. Paths connect places that seemed separate when you walked among them. Farther west, Taygetus rises with a scale that no human building in Sparta can rival. The city is there, but the landscape is larger. You continue toward the sanctuary associated with Helen and Menelaus. For someone arriving from a much later world, their names belong first to story. Helen, whose departure for Troy becomes the beginning of an immense cycle of Greek memory. Menelaus, the Spartan king whose household stands at the center of that story. Ships, war, Troy, homecoming. Poetry repeated from one generation to another. Yet here in the country around Sparta, these figures are not confined to the distance of heroic song. They have a place, a sanctuary, ground to which people can climb. The place later generations will call the Menelaean stands east of the Eurotas, overlooking the Spartan plain. By the sanctuary in which you now walk, the sanctuary has been renewed, its physical presence tied directly to the 5th century landscape beneath your feet. Early 5th century dedications preserve the name of Menelaus. The legendary past has been given material form. You approach without the feeling that you are entering a museum of mythology. There are no labels explaining who Helen was. No one needs them. Stories live differently when they belong to a society that still uses them. A modern visitor may ask whether Helen existed as a historical person, whether the Trojan War happened in precisely the form remembered by poetry, whether memory has preserved fact or transformed it. Those are questions for another age. The people who come here do not need the past to satisfy the rules of modern historical investigation before they can honor it. Helen and Menelaus belong to the sacred geography of Laconia. That is enough. You slow near the higher ground. Wind reaches the sanctuary more easily than it reached the fields below. It moves across the skin and through your long hair, carrying away some of the warmth that accumulated during the climb. Below, the Eurotas Valley is bright. Sparta seems almost modest from here. That modesty would confuse anyone who knows only its reputation. Perhaps this is one reason memory becomes so important in a place like this. Athens will surround itself with monumental stone. Sparta also carries power through stories, bodies, customs, ancestry, ritual, and the repeated behavior of generations. A sanctuary to Helen and Menelaus connects the people below with a world imagined as older than their institutions. The present borrows depth from the past, and the past remains alive because the present continues to visit it. You think of the small lead figures offered near Artemis Orthia. The difference in scale is striking. A tiny piece of lead in one place, a heroic name known across the Greek world in another, yet both rely upon the same human instinct, to remember by returning, to make memory physical, to give it a location. Perhaps this is why sacred places endure so powerfully in human imagination. A story can move from mouth to mouth and change with every generation. A hill stays where it is. The wind crosses it. Rain darkens it. Sunlight returns. Children become parents, and then elders beneath the same horizon. The place becomes a kind of witness. Below you, men and women are moving through a society that believes itself connected to those older heroic names. But the Sparta of your own age is not the Sparta of Homeric song. The kingship has changed. Institutions have grown around it. The citizen body has developed customs that the imagined Menelaus of epic would not recognize as his own. Two royal houses now share the strange dignity of kingship. Ephors supervise. Elders deliberate, citizens gather. The social order rests upon distinctions between Spartiates, perioikoi and helots. The past is honored, but no society simply remains its own legend. You look once more across the valley. The distance softens individual lives. From here, you cannot easily distinguish the citizen from the helot. You cannot see who owns land and who works it. You cannot see who may speak in an assembly and who may not. Human categories become difficult to recognize when viewed from far enough away. The fields do not display legal status. The roofs do not reveal political privilege. A body moving along a path is simply a body moving along a path. Perhaps distance is one of the few things that makes everyone appear equal. Then you begin to descend. The path carries you back toward the plain, and gradually the details return. Voices, footsteps, the texture of soil, animals moving somewhere beyond your direct view, the warmer air gathering lower in the valley. The closer you come to people, the more distinctions reappear. You pass through the social world again. A free woman belonging to a Spartiate household may control property that another Greek observer would expect to remain far more firmly in male hands. A perioikos may be personally free, yet permanently outside your citizen body. A helot may possess family relationships and personal goods, but remain bound within an unfree system. A boy born into the correct household may be shaped towards citizenship from childhood. Another child born only a short distance away may never possess the same political future. Sparta makes strong claims about similarity among its citizen men, the homoi, the peers, the equals. But equality within a narrow group can exist beside deep inequality beyond it. Even within the citizen body, the name does not mean that every man possesses identical wealth. Property is not distributed with perfect mathematical balance. Some households have more, some less. Later observers will criticize the concentration of Spartan property and the inequalities developing within a society that speaks so strongly about common discipline. The contradiction does not need to surprise you. Human beings have always been capable of believing in equality inside one boundary while accepting inequality beyond it. Sometimes the boundary is a city, sometimes citizenship, sometimes sex, sometimes birth, sometimes wealth. Sparta is not unusual because contradiction exists here. It is unusual because its reputation for equality and discipline can make the contradiction easier to overlook. You continue toward the lower ground. A group of women draws your attention as you pass nearer to settled country. Their presence returns you to another feature outsiders repeatedly notice about Sparta. Free Spartiate women are visible within the economic and social life of their households in ways that many other Greeks find striking. They can inherit property. They can control property. Their connection to land matters because land is not merely wealth in this society. Land supports the contributions and lifestyle expected of citizen households. The agricultural economy sustaining a Spartiate man can therefore be entangled with property held or managed by women. Centuries of later interpretation will exaggerate some aspects and misunderstand others, but one thing remains difficult to deny. Spartan women occupy an unusually prominent economic position by the standards of many Greek polies. That prominence does not give them a seat among the male political institutions. No woman is about to become one of the 5 ephors. No woman joins the male citizen assembly as your political counterpart. Yet the neat separation between a public male world and an invisible female household world becomes harder to maintain here. Women matter to the distribution and management of wealth. They matter to religion. They matter to the continuity of citizen households. And the physical education encouraged among free Spartan girls makes their bodies part of civic concern as well. You remember the younger girls encountered earlier. Running. Training. Growing within expectations different from those placed upon boys, but expectations nonetheless shaped by the community. Xenophon will later explain the practice through the Spartan concern for strong offspring, a distinctly ancient way of thinking about bodies and the future of the citizen population. Whatever later generations make of the explanation, the practice itself unsettles easy stereotypes. Sparta does not ask its free women to become copies of its men, nor does it remove them from the social order. It makes them important in a different way. The sun is high enough now that shade has become more desirable. A wall, a tree, the side of a structure, small differences in exposure matter more as the day advances. Stone warmed by sunlight gives back heat when you pass close to it. Dry ground holds warmth differently from vegetation. The breeze that felt merely pleasant above the valley now seems more valuable. Temperature alters the pace of movement. You are in no hurry. The adult male life available to you is structured less by productive labor than by citizenship itself. Because helot labor supports the estates connected to Spartiate households, men like you are expected to remain available for a different set of obligations. Physical readiness, military service, public affairs, religion, communal dining, hunting, the company and scrutiny of other citizens. This is not leisure in the modern sense. Your freedom from ordinary agricultural labor does not mean freedom from expectation. Quite the opposite. The citizen body claims your time precisely because someone else performs much of the work that would otherwise consume it. The system removes one form of obligation and replaces it with another. You notice men moving together across open ground. There is nothing preserved from this day that allows anyone to reconstruct an exact hourly schedule for them. No document survives saying that a Spartiate must perform one exercise when the sun reaches one point and another exercise when it reaches the next. The image of Sparta as a perfectly timed military machine belongs more to later imagination than to surviving evidence. Yet physical preparedness is woven deeply into adult male identity. The body remains a public concern long after childhood. You have not graduated from being observed. A citizen is still expected to appear capable of fulfilling the role for which he has been prepared. The disciplined body communicates something before it acts. It says that the man belongs, that he can endure, that he is ready to stand among others. And here again the individual and the group meet each other. Spartan reputation is built upon men whose personal courage matters, yet whose greatest military identity emerges when each accepts a place within collective order. The same society that encourages resourcefulness in hungry boys also prizes discipline among grown men. Cunning and obedience, individual endurance and communal expectation. Another contradiction that becomes less contradictory when lived rather than diagrammed. Farther away, Beyond the immediate settlement, the slopes and rougher country surrounding the valley draw your gaze. Hunting belongs naturally to this adult male world. It offers physical exertion and time away from the more settled paths, and game brought back from a hunt can contribute something additional to the common meal later in the day. You begin moving toward country where the ground becomes less regular. The cultivated land does not disappear all at once. Fields gradually surrender space to rougher surfaces. Vegetation changes. The path becomes less smooth. The valley has always contained both human order and land that resists being arranged neatly. A hunting party does not require a battlefield to test the body. Distance does that. Uneven ground, heat, attention. The need to move through a landscape rather than across a prepared civic space. Dogs can accompany hunters through this kind of country, alert to things human senses notice too slowly. You hear movement somewhere beyond the path. It may be nothing more remarkable than an animal passing through vegetation. The world is full of sounds whose causes remain unseen. A rustle, a brief call, the shifting of dry growth beneath feet or paws. You do not need to pursue anything. The purpose of being here is not to manufacture an adventure that the historical evidence never promised. It is enough to understand why hunting belongs comfortably within the life of a citizen who is neither ploughing his own field nor confined to a military drill ground. It occupies the space between exercise, social practice, food, and landscape. A hunt can eventually return to the evening table. An animal taken in the rougher country can become an addition to the controlled simplicity of communal dining. The mountain and the dining room are connected before anyone sits down. You pause where the ground allows a wider view. Taygetus again dominates the west. No matter where you have walked today, the mountain keeps returning. It appeared at the house, beyond the boys, near the fields, from the Menelaean, and now from rougher country beyond the cultivated plain. A mountain can become part of a civilization without anyone building it. Perhaps that is why landscape so often outlives political systems in human memory. Walls fall. Assemblies disappear. Titles lose their meaning. A ridge continues receiving sunlight. Sparta's people have organized an extraordinary human system beneath Taygetus. But Taygetus does not belong to that system. It simply surrounds it. You think of the generations who have moved beneath it. The older Spartans who were young when Persia came into Greece. Those who knew men who marched toward Thermopylae. Those who remember the earthquake. Those who lived through the helot revolt that followed. The children training now will inherit memories they did not personally create. Soon enough they will speak of events before their birth as part of who they are. This is one way societies become old, not by surviving unchanged, but by carrying more memories than any single person can possess. Thermopylae already belongs to Spartan identity, but it is not yet remote antiquity. Leonidas is not a figure separated from you by thousands of years. Only a few decades stand between your day and his final march. A man in his later years might remember him. A family may remember someone who followed him. The story can still have names close enough to touch living households. Yet even here, the red cloak of imagination does not sweep across every moment. The Spartan military appearance that becomes famous includes red clothing in martial contexts and the long hair associated with adult citizen men. Herodotus preserves the image of Spartans caring for their hair before battle. It is a quiet detail, almost gentle. Men preparing to die, attending to how they look, not because vanity has suddenly replaced discipline, but because appearance itself can participate in ritualized readiness. Long hair moves in the wind now around men who are not preparing for battle. It belongs to life before it belongs to death. Later pictures will freeze Spartan men forever in armor. But armor is not skin. A helmet can be removed. A shield can be put down. A spear can lean against a wall. The human body remains after the equipment is gone. Heat touches it. Hunger visits it. Age changes it. Hair grows. Feet tire. The warrior is still a person who must eventually eat. That thought begins to pull you gently back toward the settlement. The day has advanced. The harshest brightness will not remain forever, but evening is still some distance away. There is ample time before the common meal, enough time for the city to show other sides of itself. You follow the route back from rougher country toward more familiar ground. The first cultivated areas return gradually. The smell of worked land replaces the drier scent of uncultivated growth. A few people move along paths connecting one part of the region to another. The surrounding communities of Laconia remain present even when their boundaries cannot be seen. Perioikoi inhabit settlements beyond the central Spartan citizen community, and through them the state reaches into a wider economic and military landscape. They will stand in armies alongside Spartans. They participate in production and exchange. The material life of Laconia cannot be reduced to the labor of helots and the discipline of Spartiates. There are many hands between field and shield, many lives between city and mountain. Earlier centuries made this especially visible through craft. Laconian pottery once traveled far beyond the valley. Metalworkers shaped objects that crossed the Mediterranean. Ivory, bone, stone, clay, bronze. Materials passed through skilled hands in a region remembered too easily as though it cared only for iron weapons. By your own time, around 450 BC, that earlier artistic flourishing has diminished. The visual culture of archaic Laconia belongs partly to generations before yours. But old objects do not vanish when an artistic fashion fades. Sanctuaries keep offerings. Families keep possessions. Forms and techniques leave traces. The society around you carries an artistic past, even if it no longer produces at the same earlier scale. And music remains harder to bury than pottery. It passes through bodies rather than shelves. A melody does not require a workshop. A festival can carry song into places that seem severe when empty. The road toward Amyclae returns to your awareness. The Hyacinthia belongs to the sacred year there, gathering different parts of the Laconian population through procession, sacrifice, athletic activity, and music. For a few days the ordinary rhythm changes. People who normally occupy different positions within society participate within the same larger religious event. Free and unfree, men and women. Different statuses remain real, but the festival gives them a shared landscape and shared time. You imagine the sound. Not because music is playing here now. It is not. The present path is quieter. But memory allows the empty road to hold two versions of itself. The road as it is, the road when a procession fills it, the same stones, different footsteps, the same air, different voices. Perhaps a civilization is partly made from these overlapping versions of place. What happens every day? What happens once a year? what happened a generation ago, what people believe happened in the age of heroes. All of them coexist. You pass another stretch of shade. The relief is immediate. Temperature falls just enough for the body to notice. You stop there briefly. From nearby comes the ordinary sound of conversation, no speech of kings, no command before battle, just voices too indistinct to understand. That too belongs to Sparta. Most words spoken here will never enter history. A remark about food, a concern about property, a question about a child, a joke among men, a disagreement forgotten before sunset. Historians inherit laws, wars, institutions, fragments of poetry, stories worth repeating. Life contains far more than inheritance can preserve. The silence in the historical record is crowded with ordinary speech. You remain in the shade for another moment, then continue. As you come nearer to Sparta again, older and younger men share the same spaces. Age has remained visible throughout the day, but now its political meaning returns. A man may be physically past his strongest years, and yet closer than ever to the highest civic authority available to him. The Gerousia gives 8 elder citizens, together with the 2 kings, a formal role at the center of Spartan deliberation. The society that disciplines youth also waits upon age. Perhaps this alters the relationship between generations. The young do not merely replace the old. They live beneath institutions in which the old can continue shaping the lives of those who follow. A citizen grows from being watched to becoming one of those who watches. Time changes his position without releasing him from the community. The sun has begun the almost imperceptible movement toward the later part of the day. Shadows are still short, but no longer identical to what they were when you stood near Artemis or Thea. The city has changed without moving. You have changed your distance from it, your angle upon it, your awareness of the people inside it, and somewhere among those people, preparations for the eventual common dining of citizen men will begin long before the meal itself becomes visible. Barley has already grown. Cheese already exists because animals were tended. Figs have ripened beneath the same sun, now warming the paths. Wine has passed through seasons you never witnessed. Perhaps someone returning from a hunt will contribute something additional. The evening table is gathering itself from different corners of the landscape, but there are still hours before you sit among the other men. For now, the path leads you once more between the dispersed, inhabited spaces of Sparta, past human voices and warm stone, toward the living center of a society whose discipline is most visible not when it is fighting, but when an ordinary day continues to ask each person to remain within the place assigned to them. The place assigned to you is not marked by a sign. It is carried in habits, in who may sit beside whom, in who is expected to speak, in who is expected to listen, in who has spent the day working the land, and who has spent it moving through the obligations of citizenship. As the light begins to soften, those distinctions do not disappear. They simply take on another form. The heat has lost some of its force now. Warmth still rests on stone and dry earth, but the air no longer presses downward with the same weight it carried earlier. Shadows stretch farther from walls and trees. The scattered spaces of Sparta begin to feel closer together, not because the settlement has changed, but because people are gradually turning toward places where the later hours of the day will be spent. You walk among them. The city is quieter than a modern imagination might expect from a society so famous for collective discipline. There is no constant roar of command, no endless striking of shields, no permanent military spectacle. Most discipline is quieter than that. It lives in repeated expectations. A man knows where he should be. A boy knows who is watching. An elder knows that younger citizens will notice his judgment. An official knows that his authority exists only for a time. A king knows that kingship itself has limits. The structures of Spartan life do not always announce themselves with sound. They can be felt in the way people move around one another. You pass near men who have already lived through much more of Sparta than you have. Some are old enough that the Persian wars belong to their own youth. Thermopylae is still near enough in time for memory to carry individual voices. Leonidas has not yet become the distant emblem that later centuries will create. He belongs to a generation whose lives still touch the present through fathers, brothers, sons, companions, and stories repeated within households. The famous battle has already shaped the reputation of Sparta far beyond this valley, but here its memory does not need to be shouted. It can rest in the presence of an older man, in a family name, in the knowledge that someone once left this same landscape and did not return. Memory becomes quieter when it belongs to people rather than monuments. You move on. The absence of enormous memorial architecture still feels significant. Sparta's landscape does not compel remembrance through size. Instead, memory is carried socially. A child hears about those who came before. A citizen grows into obligations shaped by examples he never witnessed. The past enters the body through expectation. One generation teaches another what kind of person it should become. The boys you saw earlier are part of that process. By the time they reach adulthood, they will not simply know stories about Spartan endurance. They will have spent years learning that endurance is expected of them. Perhaps that is how reputation becomes self-sustaining. People hear what their society is supposed to be, and then they spend their lives trying to inhabit the description. The result is never perfect. No human community is. But the attempt can become powerful enough that outsiders begin to mistake aspiration for total reality. Sparta is especially vulnerable to this. Later admirers will imagine a city without softness. Later critics will imagine one without humanity. Neither image can contain the world through which you have been walking. There are too many ordinary people for that. Too much property. Too much ritual, too much dependence, too much memory, too much food that must be grown before discipline can be practiced. The day itself has already demonstrated this. The Spartan citizen may appear to stand at the center of the system, yet his life reaches outward into almost every group around him. His household may depend upon property managed in part by women. His agricultural support depends upon helot labor. His state depends upon the communities of the perioikoi. His public identity depends upon other citizens. His political world depends upon kings, ephors, elders, and assembly. His religious life depends upon sanctuaries, festivals, gods, and heroes whose presence cannot be reduced to military purpose. Even his evening meal depends upon a network of land, labor, animals, seasons, and social obligation. That meal is drawing nearer. You can feel the day turning toward it. For a full citizen man, communal dining is not merely a practical way to eat. It is one of the places where citizenship becomes physical. Men gather. Food is shared. Older and younger citizens inhabit the same space. Conversation moves among them. The meal reinforces the fact that a Spartiate does not live entirely as a private man. He belongs repeatedly to other men. The household may give him a place to sleep. The communal table reminds him that citizenship has its own household. As you approach the place where such a meal will be taken, the atmosphere changes almost imperceptibly. There is no banquet hall overflowing with luxury, no lavish display intended to prove private wealth. The ideal presented by Spartan communal dining is controlled simplicity. The foods associated with these meals are modest: barley, cheese, figs, wine. Additional food may come from hunting. A man with greater resources can sometimes contribute more, including finer bread. The existence of such additions is revealing. Spartan equality is not the disappearance of difference. Even at a table designed to emphasize common belonging, wealth can still leave traces. A better contribution, a different addition, a quiet reminder that men called peers are not identical in everything they possess, but the meal itself places them together. You enter among them. The room, or gathering space, feels different after the long openness of the valley. The day's sunlight has followed you through fields, sanctuaries, rough ground, and hillside paths. Now human proximity becomes more noticeable. Bodies carry warmth. Voices are closer. The smell of food begins to replace the smell of dry earth and vegetation. Wine has a sharper presence than water. Cheese carries salt and animal richness. Barley belongs to the fields you passed earlier, but here it has changed form completely. The landscape has become edible. You sit. Around you are other citizen men, some older, some younger, different lives, different households, different levels of wealth, but all sharing a status that separates them from most of the people who made the meal possible. The simplicity is deliberate enough that later writers will remember it. There is no need to turn the meal into an ordeal. Spartan dining is not designed so that every mouthful must be unpleasant, nor is abundance the point. Restraint is. The body is fed without becoming the center of indulgence. Wine is present without requiring drunkenness. Food satisfies without transforming the gathering into a display of excess. The famous black broth belongs to the traditions surrounding Spartan meals. Later generations will remember it intensely, perhaps more intensely than the people eating here would recognize. It will become one of those details that seems to explain an entire civilization in a single bowl. Dark broth, Sparta reduced to taste. But no civilization should be reduced to one dish. The more elaborate stories about the broth come largely from later sources, and the exact recipe and role should not be imagined with more certainty than the evidence allows. So the bowl, if it appears, is simply part of the table. Not a test, not a symbol announced by the narrator, not proof that Spartans secretly hated pleasure. It is food among other food. A man eats. Another drinks. A voice enters the conversation. The room continues. This is where age becomes socially visible once again. Younger men share space with older ones. The evening meal is not merely nutritional. It can educate. A younger citizen hears how older men speak. He learns what is approved. He learns what draws attention. He learns when to remain silent. The community continues shaping him long after formal childhood practices have ended. Citizenship is something people rehearse together. The table becomes one of its stages. Yet the mood does not need to be severe. Human beings do not cease being human because a society values restraint. There can be conversation here, observation, familiarity. Men who have sat together many times do not need to behave as strangers performing solemnity. Their relationships have accumulated. Someone's absence may be noticed, someone's contribution recognized. Someone older may speak while someone younger listens. The communal setting creates intimacy of a particular kind. Not domestic intimacy, civic intimacy. You begin to understand why a society so concerned with collective discipline would care deeply about who eats with whom. Eating is among the most ordinary human acts. That is precisely why it matters. If a state wants citizenship to enter daily life, it does not need to wait for battle. It can enter through dinner. The sound in the room is gentle. Cups placed down, food divided. Occasional laughter, perhaps, though nothing in the evidence allows us to reconstruct the exact words or jokes of this particular gathering. We do not need them. The atmosphere can remain honest without invented dialogue. It is enough to hear indistinct voices and know that most of what was said tonight will vanish completely. No historian will preserve it. No inscription will record it. The sentences disappear as soon as the men who heard them die. And yet those lost conversations may have mattered more to the people living here than many events later books will describe in detail. History remembers selectively. Human beings do not live selectively. They live everything, the important and the trivial, the sacred and the ordinary, the famous battle and the meal afterward, the remembered king and the forgotten friend sitting nearby. You taste wine. It carries an entire landscape inside it. Vines rooted in Laconian soil, seasons of sun, hens that tended and gathered, fermentation taking time invisible to anyone drinking now. A cup is a small form of history, not the history of kings. The history of transformation. Soil becomes fruit. Fruit becomes drink. Labor becomes leisure for someone else. Time becomes flavor. You set the cup down. The contrast between the men at the table and the people outside it remains quietly present. Helots do not become citizens because they contributed to producing the food. Perioikoi do not become members of the Spartiate political body because their communities sustain the wider state. Women whose property may support households do not take their place here as political equals beside the men. The meal unites one group partly by revealing who is not included. Communities often become visible at their boundaries. To say, where's always to define an edge? Sparta has many edges, some legal, some economic, some based upon sex, some based upon birth, some based upon age. And the man you have become for this one day stands on the fortunate side of many of them. It would be easy to feel powerful. You are a full citizen of one of the most respected military states in Greece. You are freed from much manual agricultural labor. You participate in communal institutions. You belong to the class whose discipline will be admired and feared far beyond the Eurotas Valley. But the closer you look at that power, the more dependent it becomes. Your position exists only because other positions exist beneath and around it. A Spartiate without helot agriculture would need another economic foundation. A Spartiate without perioikoi communities would inhabit a very different Laconia. A citizen without other citizens would possess no citizen body. A king without ephors, elders, and law would belong to another constitution. Spartan strength is not the simplicity of one hard man. It is the complexity of an entire social arrangement. That complexity has been hidden by later memory, because a shield is easier to remember than an institution. A red garment is easier to paint than a land system. A heroic death is easier to dramatize than an evening meal. But here, seated among other men, you can feel how much more of Sparta exists outside the battlefield. The meal continues at an unhurried pace. Outside, the light is changing. You cannot see the whole valley from where you sit, but you know what is happening. The sun is lowering toward Taygetus. Fields that were painfully bright during the middle of the day are beginning to lose their glare. The exposed sides of buildings shift from white heat toward softer tones. Longer shadows return. People still outdoors begin moving through cooler air. Animals settle into different rhythms. The landscape is preparing for darkness long before darkness arrives. Inside, conversation carries on. Perhaps news of civic matters enters the room. Perhaps older men speak about public affairs. The exact subject tonight is beyond the research we possess, so it remains indistinct. What matters is the setting. Men whose identities are deeply public continue to encounter one another in a place where eating, companionship, discipline, and citizenship overlap. You notice the older faces again. In this society, age can lead toward political authority, rather than simply away from public relevance. The Gerousia is composed of elders alongside the kings. A man may lose speed and gain influence. Wrinkles can signify proximity to a role younger men cannot yet hold. The body weakens while social weight increases. Time takes and gives in the same movement. Younger men will someday occupy those places if life allows them. And younger boys, now outside this adult circle, may one day sit where you sit. The community is always replacing itself, not all at once, one body at a time. A boy learns restraint. A young man enters adult expectations. A citizen grows older. An elder disappears. Someone else takes his place. Institutions create the illusion of permanence because individuals pass through them faster than the institutions change. Sparta can feel eternal to someone born inside it. But nothing you have seen today is truly still. Even the famous system is the product of time. Customs develop. Power shifts. Population changes. Memories accumulate. The earthquake proved that the land itself can interrupt human certainty. The helot revolt proved that social arrangements can be challenged. The Persian Wars proved that even distant powers can arrive in Greek memory with overwhelming force. And yet this evening meal continues as though continuity itself were a form of resistance. Men eat. That simple act says the society has survived another day. The room grows dimmer. No artificial brightness pushes back against the evening. Light diminishes naturally. Human faces become less precise. Edges soften. Objects that seemed clear earlier begin to merge into shadow. The senses adjust. Sound becomes more important when sight begins giving less. A cup can be located by touch. A voice carries identity even when the face is not perfectly visible. The smell of food lingers after hunger has eased. Wine remains in the air. Body heat becomes noticeable as the outside temperature falls. You begin to understand how deeply the daily rhythm of an ancient settlement follows the sun. There is no switch separating day from night. Darkness arrives gradually and then becomes complete. Human behavior bends around it. Meals end. Paths become harder to read. Distance changes. The landscape that felt open in daylight begins to contract into what can be seen, heard, and remembered. Soon the citizens here will leave, and when they do, another Spartan practice will become relevant. Xenophon records that men of military age returning from the common meal were expected to walk home without using a torch to light their way. The rule forces confidence in darkness, familiarity with paths, attention, another small exercise in endurance embedded not in battle or formal training, but in the simple act of going home. You do not rise yet. There is still food before some of the men, still wine, still conversation. The night outside continues gathering slowly. Somewhere beyond these walls, the first stars will soon become easier to see. Taygetus will lose its detail and remain only as a darker mass against the sky. The Eurotas will continue moving through the valley, whether anyone can see its surface or not. At Artemis Orthia, the tiny lead offerings will rest in darkness. Athena's sanctuary will quiet upon the low Acropolis. The Menelaean will stand above the plain, with Helen and Menelaus no less present to belief because sunlight has disappeared. Amyclae will remain to the south, its festival roads empty for now. Fields will hold the same barley beneath starlight that they held beneath the midday sun. Helot households will continue their own lives beyond the circle of citizen dining. Perioikoi communities will continue beyond the central settlement. Your wife will inhabit the household toward which you will eventually return. One valley. Many nights beginning at once. The room dims another degree. A man near you finishes eating. Another shifts his position. A cup is moved across a surface. No one announces that the day has ended. Ancient days do not end with announcements. They fade, and gradually, almost without anyone needing to say it, the men around you begin to sense that the time for remaining at the common table is passing, while outside the doorway the familiar paths of Sparta are surrendering themselves to darkness. The first men rise without ceremony. One after another, bodies that have spent the evening close together begin to separate. A cup is set down, a final mouthful is taken. The low conversation thins as people prepare to leave the common meal and return to their households. Outside, Sparta has become another place. The daylight that revealed fields, paths, faces, and distant ridges has withdrawn. The settlement is no longer held together by sight. Darkness removes the easy confidence of distance. A familiar building becomes a shape. A path becomes something remembered through the feet. The valley is no longer a broad picture beneath the sun. It is sound, temperature, memory. The men step outside. No torch is raised for those still of military age. Xenophon tells us that this was expected. The journey home from the common meal was to be made without artificial light, another small discipline placed inside an ordinary act. So you walk with the darkness rather than against it. At first the eyes search for what the daylight has taken away. Edges disappear. The ground closest to you is easier to sense than to see clearly. You remember the paths traveled throughout the day, but darkness changes their proportions. A turning that seemed obvious beneath the sun now arrives more quietly. The open spaces feel larger. The narrow places seem closer. Your feet become cautious without becoming afraid. You have moved through this landscape before. The men around you have done the same. Familiarity becomes a kind of light. There is still enough sky above to separate the black mass of Taygetus from the darkness behind it. The mountain is no longer grey or blue. It is simply deeper night. Stars emerge where the sun once dominated everything. No city glow weakens them. No illuminated road draws the eye downward. Human settlement occupies only a small portion of what can be seen above. The sky is larger than Sparta. For all the discipline, institutions, laws, property, memory, and hierarchy that shape the day, none of them alters the stars. The same sky extends beyond Laconia, beyond the Peloponnese, beyond every Greek polis that measures itself against another. People divide land. The night refuses division, you continue. Somewhere off the path there is movement, not danger, simply life continuing beyond the range of sight. An animal settling, a person crossing another route, a sound from a household. The small noises of habitation seem clearer now because there is less to distract the eye. A voice carries and then disappears. Footsteps approach, pass, fade behind you. The air has cooled. The heat stored in walls and earth has not vanished completely, but the body feels the difference. The valley releases the day gradually. Warmth remains in some surfaces, while open air becomes softer and cooler against the skin. Your long hair moves slightly when the breeze reaches it. For most of the day, that hair belonged to status, custom, and the visible identity of an adult citizen. Now, in darkness, it is simply something touched by air. The social world has not disappeared. You remain a Spartiate. The helot remains unfree. The perioikos remains outside your citizen body. Your wife remains excluded from the formal political institutions in which you participate. The kings are still kings. The ephors are still ephors. The elders still carry authority. But darkness makes these differences less visible to the eye. It cannot erase them, only conceal them for a while. Perhaps that is one reason the night feels gentle. It does not solve the human world. It covers it. The road leads closer to the household where the day began. Before you reach it, another group of men turns away toward a different part of the scattered settlement. No grand avenue gathers everyone. No city wall channels all movement through a gate. Sparta disperses people into the valley again. One path becomes several, voices divide. The communal body of the evening meal gradually becomes households, individuals, separate footsteps moving under the same sky. You think of the word homoioi again, peers, equals. At the table the word had seemed almost physical. Men of the same privileged class, sharing food, discipline, and civic identity. Now each man is going somewhere different. One may return to a household supported by more property than another. One may be younger, another older. One may someday enter the Gerousia if age and circumstance allow. Another may never hold such authority. The ideology of similarity has never required human lives to become identical. It asks them to inhabit a shared civic form. The same form can contain unequal wealth, unequal influence, different families, different memories. A community can call men equal and still know exactly which among them is richer, older, more respected, more connected, or more fortunate. This is not uniquely Spartan. It is simply more visible here because the language of common discipline is so strong. The path bends. Ahead, the household is not yet clearly visible, but you know where it stands. The confidence is not based on light. It comes from repetition. The body remembers where to turn. You have followed some version of this route many times. Perhaps after other meals, perhaps after other gatherings, perhaps after nights colder or warmer than this one. No single journey home is historically preserved. That absence gives the moment its truth. Most of life leaves no record. A man walks home. The earth receives his footsteps. Then both continue. When you reach the household, the darkness changes once more. The outside world narrows at the threshold. The house holds its own warmth, its own smells, its own quiet. Your wife belongs to this interior world, but not only to it. The day has already shown how misleading such a simple division would be. Her economic place may reach outward through property, inheritance, household management, and the land that sustains the family. The house is not an isolated female sphere, while men possess everything beyond the doorway. Spartan society does not divide itself so neatly. Yet the household still has a different rhythm from the communal meal. Here, citizenship loosens its grip just enough for domestic life to become more noticeable. You are not sitting among the citizen body now. You are one person among the people whose lives are tied most closely to this roof. The light, if any remains inside, is modest. There is no need to invent a lavish interior for a city whose architecture does not match the scale of its later fame. The room is familiar because the day began here, but it no longer feels the same. Nothing does after being carried through an entire day. A wall seen after waking is only a wall. The same wall encountered after fields, sanctuaries, roads, political spaces, and communal dining holds the memory of everything outside it. You have returned, but return is never reversal. The day cannot be walked backward. Your body carries fatigue that was not there before. Dust belongs to your feet and clothing. The air feels cooler against skin warmed by movement. Hunger has eased. The voices of the common meal still seem almost present, though they have already fallen behind you. Somewhere outside, other citizens are entering other houses. Helot families are also settling into night. Perioikoi communities beyond central Sparta are passing into darkness of their own. The same stars hang above people who do not share the same rights. That fact has followed the entire day. It does not require one final judgment. The world itself has shown it repeatedly. Your freedom has been visible in time. Time to move through public life. Time to train or hunt. Time to attend communal meals. Time to participate in the citizen order. That freedom is sustained by labor that belongs to others. The field seen in daylight remains beyond the walls now, invisible but not absent. Barley does not cease growing because no one can see it. Vines continue through the night. Fig trees stand where they stood at noon. Olives remain rooted in the same soil. The agricultural world does not sleep in the human sense. It simply enters another stage of darkness, temperature, moisture, and time. So does the river. The Eurotas continues along its course without ceremony. It passed near the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia before you arrived. It remained while people made offerings. It remained while citizens gathered elsewhere. It remains now. Water is perhaps the perfect opposite of the Spartan ideal of fixed position. It never holds formation. It bends around obstruction. It takes the shape of what contains it. It moves by yielding, and still it endures. A society can praise hardness and live beside a river. There is no contradiction that nature needs to resolve. Human beings choose one lesson from the world and ignore another. The mountain teaches permanence. The river teaches movement. The field teaches dependence. The night teaches limits. The city contains all of them. You rest for a while. The quiet does not mean Sparta has stopped. Somewhere a child is still awake. Somewhere an older person shifts in sleep. Somewhere an animal makes a small sound. Somewhere a late conversation ends. There are no great events here. That is precisely the point. You did not wake into the day of Thermopylae. No Persian army crossed the horizon. No earthquake broke the ground. No helot revolt erupted before you. No king died. No assembly altered the fate of Greece. You woke into something history usually fails to preserve. An ordinary Spartan day, and an ordinary day has revealed more than spectacle could. The famous warrior city was not only warriors, it was wives and property, children being shaped by public expectations, helots working agricultural land, perioikoi living as free inhabitants beyond the full citizen body, elders carrying authority, kings living under institutions that limited them, small lead offerings left before a goddess, heroic names attached to hills, roads that could become processional routes during festival time, hunting country, barley, cheese, figs, wine, long hair, bare feet, heat, dust, darkness, the ordinary materials of an extraordinary reputation. You do not need to gather them into a lesson. They can remain separate. A civilization is not required to explain itself before you leave it. Perhaps understanding comes more gently when the pieces are allowed to remain alive. The boys you saw will grow if life permits. Some will enter the citizen world that now surrounds you. Their training will become memory in their bodies. The girls will also grow into the expectations of free Spartan women, into households, property, religious life, and the social structures available to them. The helot children of the valley will inherit a different future. The distinction may begin before any child can understand what citizenship means. Birthplaces one person near privileges another may never receive. Every society tells stories about merit. The body often arrives in a structure before merit has the chance to speak. Sparta is especially clear about belonging. It does not pretend that everyone living under its power is on the same road. The citizen boy is being shaped toward membership. The helot is held in dependence. The perioikos remains free but politically separate. The woman of a citizen household may possess unusual economic strength while remaining outside male civic office. Every life is given a different doorway. You have spent the day passing through yours. That does not make your experience false. Privilege is still a real life to the person living it. The danger comes only when one life is mistaken for the whole society. Perhaps later generations will do exactly that with Sparta. They will see the citizen warrior and allow him to stand in for everyone. They will forget the people in fields. They will reduce women to slogans. They will turn children into stories of cruelty. They will transform restraint into caricature. They will dress every man in a red cloak and make every street a parade ground. They will remember a battle more vividly than a meal. It is understandable. Battle leaves clean images. Daily life does not. But you have walked through the untold reality. The city was dispersed. Its power exceeded its buildings. Its equality had boundaries. Its freedom depended upon unfreedom. Its discipline existed alongside property, religion, family, music, food, memory, and landscape. Its famous hardness stood beneath a changing sky. That is enough. The house grows quieter. You can sense the body preparing to release the day. Not through command, through heaviness. Muscles no longer need to carry you across the valley. The feet that felt rough ground, cultivated paths, and rising slopes can stop. The eyes that searched through darkness no longer need to find the next turning. You are inside. The night continues without asking anything of you. Outside, the sanctuary of Athena Chalkioikos remains on the low Acropolis. No worshipper needs to be standing there for the place to remain sacred. Across the valley, Helen and Menelaus remain associated with their high ground. The Menelaean does not disappear when no one climbs toward it. To the south, Amyclae remains linked to Apollo and Hykynthos, waiting for the sacred calendar to gather people again. Near the Eurotas, the small offerings to Artemis Orthia rest, where human hands have placed them. Tiny pieces of lead, so small compared with the mountains. And yet they may survive when the names of their donors do not. There is something peaceful in that imbalance. People often dream of being remembered through greatness. Sometimes what remains is a tiny object no one expected to outlive them. The hand disappears, the offering stays. The city changes, the river moves, centuries pass. But you are not required to travel those centuries tonight. You are still here. Around 450 BC, the world beyond the room does not know what will happen next. It does not know that historians will argue about its institutions. It does not know that Sparta will become an idea repeated in languages not yet spoken. It does not know which buildings will vanish, which customs will change, which stories will become myths about myths. The people here possess no obligation to become the past. They are busy being present. That may be the gentlest way to see them, not as figures waiting to be studied, not as examples in a lesson, not as statues representing virtues or crimes, as people who do not know you are watching. A woman closing a household for the night, a man returning from common dining, a child asleep after a day shaped by expectations he cannot yet fully understand, a helot family resting before agricultural work returns with another morning, an elder whose memories extend farther back than those of the young, an ephor holding an office that will pass to someone else, a king whose title sounds eternal even though his own life is not, each person enclosed by the limits of one body and one span of time. The ancient world becomes less distant when you remember that no one inside it felt ancient. No one woke and thought, I am living in history. They woke into weather, into obligations, into hunger, into relationships, into the same need to move from one moment to the next. History is what remains after people have already finished living their present, but their present was as complete as yours. The darkness deepens. You can imagine the city from above now, not as a map with perfect boundaries, but as scattered areas of habitation lying quietly in the Eurotas Valley. No enormous walls close around them. No blazing lights separate them from the night. The settlement gives itself back to the landscape, Taygetus to the west, the river crossing the plain, cultivated ground resting beneath darkness, sacred places holding their silence, roads between them. Somewhere beyond the communities of Laconia, it is easier now to understand how someone could see this place and underestimate it. Nothing in the night declares that this is one of the most feared powers in Greece. Power sleeps quietly. It does not need always to look powerful. Perhaps no society looks like its reputation while sleeping. A shield set aside is only wood, bronze, leather, weight. A law without people awake to obey it is only memory waiting for morning. A title belongs to a sleeping body. The city that disciplines its citizens cannot command the stars to remain still. Time moves through Sparta as easily as through any other place. That is the final equality no institution can restrict. King, helot, citizen, woman, child, elder, all are carried by it, not at the same level of comfort, not with the same freedom, not with the same power, but at the same irreversible pace. The day you entered is already becoming yesterday for the people here. The morning at Artemis Orthia has vanished. The midday heat has vanished. The view from the Menelaean has vanished into darkness. The common meal has dispersed. Only memory carries them together now. Tomorrow, some of the same actions will return in different forms. Fields will need attention. Citizens will meet other citizens. Children will continue growing into social roles. Offerings will be made. Food will be prepared. Officials will exercise authority. Women will manage the concerns of households and property. Perioikoi communities will continue their work within Laconia. Helot labor will continue sustaining a system that depends upon it and fears it. The river will be there. The mountain will be there. The roads will wait for feet. Nothing needs to conclude. Sparta does not end because your eyes close. The world continues without a narrator. That may be the closest anyone can come to truly visiting the past, not by making it perform, by allowing it to continue after attention has drifted away. So remain here for as long as you wish, not in the Sparta of polished legend, not in the red, cloaked city imagined by later centuries, in this quieter valley, a place of contradictions no single word can hold, a place where discipline can coexist with song, where citizen equality can coexist with deep inequality, where women can possess unusual economic power without political equality, where kings can rule without ruling alone, where men freed from agricultural labor can depend completely upon those who perform it, where a heroic past can occupy a hill while ordinary life continues beneath it, where a tiny lead figure can carry devotion, where dinner can become citizenship, where walking home in darkness can become discipline, where one famous society is finally allowed to be made of ordinary people. The air inside the house has cooled further. Outside, there may still be a faint sound from somewhere in the settlement, but it no longer asks to be understood. The road you walked is dark. The field is dark. The sanctuary is dark. Taygetus stands beyond them all, and above the valley the stars remain indifferent to every story that people will someday tell about Sparta. They shine over the citizen, over the helot, over the wife waiting within a household, over the child whose future has already been partly shaped by birth, over the old man carrying memories of another generation, over the river moving through darkness. Nothing is frozen, nothing is finished. The city rests only for a while. Soon enough, another light will begin along the edges of the valley. Bare feet will touch the ground again. Doors will open. Animals will stir. People will return to paths whose shapes they know without thinking. The social order will rise with them. So will its obligations, its privileges, its fears, its rituals, its meals, its remembered heroes, its unrecorded conversations. And somewhere near the Eurotas, another human hand may open over another small offering while the river passes quietly beside it, carrying its water onward through a world that still has no idea it will one day be called ancient.